And now we turn our attention to Haiti. In recent weeks, the appearance of Kenya on the news has mostly been linked to the mass protests rocking the African nation. Back on June the 25th, a crowd stormed and ransacked the Parliament building, part of an outpouring of rage against an unpopular bill forced through by Prime Minister William Ruto. Undoubtedly, these are important events, so important that we dedicated a whole segment to them in a recent episode of The Situation Room. Yet, as significant as the protests are, they've tended to obscure another vital story that Nairobi is playing a lead role in. The story taking place not in Kenya itself, but in a country some 12,000 kilometers away. A story known as the Multinational Security Support Mission to Haiti. Back in October 2023, the UN Security Council signed off on a limited police intervention to restore order in Haiti, at the time in the grip of an unprecedented wave of gang violence. Designed to support the ailing Haitian National Police, the mission, known widely as the MSS, envisioned 2,500 officers descending on the capital of Port-au-Prince to help wrestle critical infrastructure from the gang's grasp. Although utilizing officers from countries as diverse as the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Chad, and Jamaica, nearly half of the force would be from Kenya, with the Kenyan commander, Godfrey Otunge, acting as overall leader. Due to delays in funding and a collapse of the Haitian government this spring, the first contingent of 200 Kenyan officers didn't arrive until June 25th, the very same day that Nairobi erupted in protests. By then, the security situation in Haiti had deteriorated even further. Here are some stats. After reaching record highs in 2022, Haiti's murder rate doubled across 2023 to 41 homicides for every 100,000 inhabitants. That made Haiti last year the most murderous nation in Latin America, not called Ecuador. But while 2024 opens with Quito declaring an internal armed conflict against its gangs, in Haiti this year things have only gotten worse. According to the New York Times, quoting UN figures, over 3,000 Haitians had already been murdered this year by the beginning of July. To help you grasp just how truly staggering that figure is, the CDC records that the state of Ohio, with a population almost identical to Haiti, suffered just 929 homicides across the whole of 2022. And 2022 was an unusually murderous year by US standards. But it's not just regarding homicides that Haiti has been breaking its own grim records. Between March and May this year, gangs attacked and burned so many neighborhoods that 200,000 people were forced to flee their homes. Across the nation, over 500,000 people have now been displaced by the violence, equivalent to 5% of the population. Another 5 million are suffering from acute food insecurity. Critical infrastructure, from ports to hospitals to government buildings, is in the hands of the gangs. This is the nightmare that a combined 400 Kenyan police officers have now been sent out to sort out. A nightmare in which about 90% of the capital city is under the control of armed groups. A nightmare that the framework for the mission envisages the MSS solving in a single year. Now, undoing Haiti's implosion in just 52 weeks was always going to be a bit of a tough ask, but observers were hopeful that the sight of highly armed and highly trained police officers might convince the gangs to stand down, to melt into the shadows rather than risk a firefight. Certainly, the initial arrival of the Kenyan forces seems to have coincided with a general reduction in violence. The Miami Herald writes that as things finally got underway, quote, "There was hope that the United Nations-backed mission would arrive with a big bang and launch a spectacular operation against Haiti's criminal groups." In the end, that didn't happen. For the first couple of weeks, the only sign that the Kenyans were in the country appeared to be low-key patrols near sensitive areas. But with the MSS now active for over a month and with 200 more officers due to arrive from Jamaica any moment, we're finally starting to get a sense of how things might go as the mission expands. The results are decidedly mixed. While the Kenyan police have scored some important victories, reporting from both the Miami Herald and Insight Crime suggest key weaknesses in the mission architecture may already be starting to show. Let's start with the good stuff. In a recent interview, Overall Commander Godfrey Otunge claimed two key victories against the gangs. The first was the recapture of the international port. The second was the liberation of the capital's general hospital. These may not be the sort of showy battles the most gung-ho supporters of the MSS were hoping for, but they're not nothing. Keeping the gangs out of the main port is crucial for solving Haiti's hunger crisis, and while the area around the General Hospital is still too dangerous to reopen it, its recapture is of symbolic value. However, even in these victories, problems are evident. In a blistering editorial in Haiti's Ayibo Post, editor-in-chief Widlaw Merencourt claimed that the gangs had never truly controlled the general hospital, but only occasionally used its empty shell as a temporary base. Therefore, he concluded, quoting, "I don't know if you can call it recapture, because the general hospital was never officially captured." To which Inside Crime added that Haitian police officers involved in the operation claimed that no members of the MSS were even present at the time. Still, as we said, these were small operations. To get a real sense of the MSS so far, we need to turn to its biggest moment yet, the battle for Ganthia. A small commune outside Port-au-Prince, Ganthia sits on the critical road leading towards the border with the Dominican Republic. Hence, most likely why the 400 Mawozo gang attacked it on Thursday the 26th of July and again on Sunday the 30th. According to the Miami Herald, gang members burned down the police station and customs annex before ransacking local businesses. But for today's story, it's what happens next that's really instructive. Within hours of the attack unfolding, the MSS descended on Ganthia. Scores of Kenyan forces arrived in American-donated, mine-resistant, ambush-protected armored vehicles. Faced with the prospect of fighting trained officers, the gang members broke and fled for their lives. So far, so good, right? Well, unfortunately, Ganthia's newfound peace didn't last. 24 hours after the Kenyans arrived, they left the commune and returned to Port-au-Prince. A spokesman later told the Miami Herald that the contractor working with the MSS had told them it would be impossible to get food supplies and mattresses to the officers in the field. And care to guess what happens once the cavalry had rolled back out of Ganthia? That's right, the members of the 400 Mawozo returns, this time looting homes and issuing warnings about bloodshed if the locals continued to defy them. In an interview with the Herald, security expert at Brookings, Vander Felber-Brown, expressed disbelief at the operation's outcome, quoting here, "What were they thinking? They were just going to ride there, hang around for a bit and pick up and go? It seems so undercooked in the very initial planning as to what the operation would look like." Yet it wasn't only planning that she cited as a main concern. Rather, Felber-Brown explained that the fiasco in Ganthia exposed just how under-resourced the MSS truly is. Although bankrolled by the USA with additional money from Canada, France, and the UN, the entire mission budget is still well under $400 million, barely enough to cover the mere 600 officers who will soon be deployed. Nor did the Security Council authorize nearly enough personnel to take part. To quote Felber-Brown again, "The actual numbers of people on the ground are woefully inadequate for what it would take to control Port-au-Prince." Port-au-Prince, after all, is not a logically laid out city with straight lines and wide sweeping boulevards that a small number of well-armed men could easily monitor. It is a dense, sprawling pressure cooker of slums and winding alleyways. The sort of place where a foreign force can easily find itself turned around, especially a foreign force that's lacking key enablers such as air support. While the MSS has been supplied with drones, other kits like helicopters and planes are not part of the mission architecture. Nor, for that matter, boats. That means going overland is the only way the Kenyan deployment can get to hotspots like Ganthia. And that is a major issue in a country where roads can be narrow and in poor condition. In a separate interview with the Herald, former security official Reginald Delver claimed that the gangs know where to hide, and without aerial support, you cannot conduct a serious operation, even if you have drones. Now, for their part, the Kenyan officers have blamed the armored vehicles donated by the Pentagon, calling on the Biden White House to supply modified versions with towers which are better for fighting with. But towers or no towers, the recent operations carried out by the MSS do not inspire massive confidence, especially when you consider that they may not have yet faced their biggest challenges. According to Inside Crime, not all gangs are likely to operate as 400 Mawozo did, fleeing before the MSS and only returning once the coast is clear. Others, such as the powerful 5 Sagon gang, have sworn to fight back and kill Kenyan officers. Already, the outlet reports that 5 Sagon and other gangs are luring civilians back to the areas they control, quote, allegedly, so they can use them as human shields. Now, of course, none of this guarantees that the Kenyan-led mission won't succeed. We need to stress that 5 Sagon may just be talking tough. We also need to emphasize that these setbacks have come while the MSS is operating at less than a fifth of its full strength. Policing a city the size of Port-au-Prince is far trickier with just 400 men than it will be with 2,500. Still, it's hard to argue that the first 5 weeks of the deployment have been anything but disappointing, and that is a fact that should worry us all. Look, as we've covered in previous episodes, Haiti, before the deployment, was a nation in freefall, a state that had so utterly collapsed that observers were beginning to call it the North American Somalia. Should the MSS fail, that collapse will continue, bringing with it all the instability the nickname implies. An instability that could trigger a refugee crisis that would overwhelm the region, sending boats full of hungry and desperate people on a dangerous voyage towards the coasts of Central America and Florida. It is in everyone's interests, then, for the MSS to succeed. So we should all cross our fingers oh so very tightly and hope that this slow start has been nothing more than a blip, something that the mission can recover from. Because the alternative is that Haiti slides ever deeper into the abyss, that more civilians are murdered, more neighborhoods reduced to anarchy, more children forced to flee their homes. And such an outcome simply doesn't bear thinking about.